What's going on, everybody? Happy New Year. Welcome to another edition of Bears Over Beers, powered by Second City Gridiron. I am your host tonight, Ryan Drosty, joined by my guy, Mr. Bryan Oranchuk. Bryan, Happy New Year. How you doing today?
Happy New Year. New Year. Great hope. Ready to move on with 2024, move forward with 2025. Obviously, we're here for the Bears. It's been a tough year, but things are looking up for for us a lot of different ways. So excited about that.
I love it. You're so positive, Bryan. We get on the show and it's like we could rant right off the start on the state of this team and where we are right now versus where we thought we were going to be when we started this show and took over Bears Over Beers at the start of the season. And my goodness, what a change. A change. The alcohol has been getting higher ABV as this season has gone along, I think you could say.
Yeah, I mean, they don't make it easy on us. In some essences, Daniel Barry Sports. In some essences, they make us work. They're making us earn our keep because, it's not fun to talk about losses and disappointment, and that's all we seem to be used to lately. And we thought this was going to be a year a little bit different, and it's almost been worse in a lot of ways, as we've talked about a few episodes back. This is one of the top 5 most disappointing seasons of our entire life, being Bears fans. So, that's pretty heavy. But there is reason for optimism. And here we are with the off season, which it kind of seems like where Bears fans are used to being. It's our comfort zone is the off season and what to look for.
Unfortunately, this is where our site, Windy City Gridiron, where it thrives in the off season with all the off season coverage.
Yeah, totally agree. No better place to be than plugged into WCG for sure.
Absolutely. So we are expecting, I just want to say off the top, we're expecting a special guest to join Bryan and I. Just got some late word that he'll be joining us here in a little bit. So stay tuned for that. I think this show is going to turn out to be a real fun one, Bryan. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. Me too. Let's get to the beverage. You go first.
Oh, you want me to go first? All right.
Yeah.
So change it up this week. Well, I thought that this beer, I may have drinking this one on the show this year. I'm not positive. But I feel like the name of this beer really encapsulates everything about the Chicago Bears in 2024. And I just had to go back with it. It's out of Minnesota, Surly Furious IPA. It's a great amber colored IPA. It's a standard here in the Midwest. If you've never had it, it's a solid beer, but Bryan, I have been so furious about this team this year that I thought it just fit the bill. So that's what I got. What do you have? And have you ever had this beer, by the way?
I've not had that. It is appropriate. And I have not seen it before. So I've not seen you drinking that one yet. But so if and when our special guest joins, I've got something special that I want to toast with him or her. But until then, I made myself a fancy schmancy gingerbread old fashioned with some Elijah Craig bourbon, some gingerbread bitters, and a little splash of ginger ale, and an orange peel garnish. Got to be old fashioned because that's the last time the Bears fans were good.
That's incredible. Old fashioned is one of my all-time favorite drinks, and that looks like you got the orange peel in there and everything.
Oh yeah,
I handed fancy.
Yeah. Yes. Tasty
Good stuff. Well, cheers, my friend. Here's this one in the glass and how it looks.
Cheers.
Oh yeah, it's good stuff. If you guys are joining us in the chat, pour one out and join us as we commiserate. Yeah, let us know what you're drinking too, so we can get involved in the show. Absolutely.
One thing I think we should do, Ryan, at some point is link our drinks, and maybe even there's an app called Untapped, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of that?
Yeah. I have it.
I have it too, but I haven't used it in years. but it'd be cool to like connect up with us on Untapped with Bears Over Beers, and then people can follow along what we've been drinking. They can comment. We can bring back like the most liked beverage that we had all year. Stuff like that would be fun.
Well, I think our guest is here. Perfect timing as we enjoy a cold one. I think I just saw him in the green room take a sip. So let me bring him on here. It's Mr. Greg Braggs Jr. from CHGO. Greg, appreciate you jumping on, man.
Yeah,
good.
Appreciate you guys having me. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm doing great. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Greg. We just introed our beverages of choice for the evening. Ryan Drosty is the gentleman you connect with already. Mm-hmm. He has himself a Furious IPA, indicative of his state of emotions at this stage of the season. I poured myself gingerbread old fashioned. And I've got something a little bit more special that I had planned if we ever were to have you as our guest. I didn't know you were going to be joining us, so I've got another drink here in the reserves I want to share. But what do you got tonight? You got anything you're sipping on?
Yeah, give me a second. I didn't know because I wasn't sure what the rules were, and that's what I was going to ask you guys. Like, if I had to have a beer, but you're not drinking a beer, Brian, so I'm glad because I'm more of a whiskey guy. Full disclosure, so I'll be right back.
Okay, nice.
Build the suspense. Very nice. Perfect timing. What kind of whiskey did you say you have in that old fashioned?
This is a bourbon. It's an Elijah Craig bourbon.
Craig, that's right.
Yeah, I love bourbon, and Elijah Craig's solid. This is strong. I don't like them sweet, so good.
I think Elijah Craig is my favorite bourbon. Just it's affordable. $35 for a bottle. It's super solid stuff. I always have that one on the shelf. That's one of my go-tos. Absolutely.
Nice.
Good.
All right.
Here he is.
Here we go.
What do we got?
Close my door here. So we're about to get crazy here. I see. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't sure because I was scared. I'm like, yeah, I drink beer. Sometimes I've gotten into it a little more here lately, but I just got this gift here from a good friend of mine here recently, and I was kind of waiting. I was like, I don't know when to do it, so it's tight here. We got really
I'm honored you're doing it here on the show.
Yeah, no, I just got it as a Christmas gift. So check this out. Check this out here. This is extra rare, aged 18 years Crown Royal.
Nice.
18-year extra rare and aged Crown Royal. So we're gonna get this in. Start having some fun. Yeah.
Cheers, Braggs, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cheers to a shitty 2024 year. That's in the past. It's behind us. Now we look ahead to 2025. So
amen.
Cheers to you guys.
Amen. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So this is going to be the Greg Gets Ultra Loose show here on Bears Over Beers in the Second City Gridiron.
So Braggsy, you got to know this about your co-host this evening. Both Ryan and I are also girl dads, and we have you strongly outnumbered. You only have one, I believe.
That's right.
And but we are girl dads, so we live and breathe the princess themed life.
How many girls you guys got?
I got 4.
I have 3.
4.
3 and 4.
Wow. You went the full Tom Waddle, Brian. That's called the full waddle.
Yeah.
And I wanted no part of the full waddle. So I said 1. We thought about having 2, and you're like, you know what? This is easy.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna tap out at 1.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you on that one.
If you keep having girls though, it gets easier because you can just pass down the clothes. You got all the princess doll houses and all of that. And
that is true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had 2. We had 2 girls, and we were like, I don't know if we want to have a third or not. Everyone was asking us, do you want to try for a boy and all that? And my thing was like, honestly, after 2, I don't really want a boy because it's going to throw off everything. I'll have to buy all new clothes, and it'll be more expensive. I want another girl, and we had a third, and it was another girl. So trifecta.
Yeah. Hey, absolutely. No, it's great. It's great. I think most guys, when they're trying to have kids, they want a boy, right? And then that girl, she ends up just like you, right? So I don't know. I think if I ended up having a boy, he probably would have been more like Jenny, which certainly would have been a good thing.
Right.
But me and Addie have spent the last 2.5, 3 hours in the kitchen doing karaoke here tonight while Ohio State was giving Oregon the beatdown. So She is exactly like me in every way, shape, and form, but for better and worse.
That's funny.
You know what's to make this Bears centric? You know what has really been killing me though about my daughters is my oldest is 9 and my next oldest is 6, and they have just started kind of like watching football a little bit. And so, of course, the Bears have been terrible most of their lives. And so, like, my oldest told me tonight again, she doesn't like the Bears. She likes the Chiefs, of course, right? She likes the Chiefs. And anytime the Bears are on, she comes in the room. She's like, Dad, are the Bears losing again? It's like the weekly, yes, they are.
Yeah.
But I promise they're going to be good again someday. You should watch them.
Yep.
Have you guys gotten a chance to, have you seen the preview at all or had a chance to see the documentary Chiefsaholic on Amazon Prime? It just came out on Christmas Eve. It's about the Chiefs diehard fan that dresses up as a wolf, and then he started robbing banks to go to games.
I heard about that.
It's excellent.
Okay.
It's excellent. And there's a personal tie with me to it because
wow.
One of the guys, a guy that I did my personal Brags and Stand show with for years, his name's Johnny B. He was my he was my neighbor for 10 years. When we used to live in our condo, like 10 minutes from where we live right now. And we're still friends. We talk all the time. He still lives in the same area as me. And he's a diehard Chiefs fan who drives to every home game and goes to a lot of the road games, goes to all the playoff games, goes to the Super Bowls. Lucky him. I know maybe one day we'll live that life. But Johnny B gets to live this life every year now. And he's been a loyal Chiefs fan his whole life. And so he was friendly with this wolf man. So he's in the documentary like a lot. He's like one of the main fans that they interview throughout the 2-hour thing. It's really good.
That is cool.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I keep trying to make myself feel better with my daughter, and I'm like, Eden, the Chiefs didn't win a Super Bowl for they had like a 50-year in between winning it. I know they won a bunch lately, but I'm like, hey, it hasn't been that long for the Bears, not quite yet. We're gonna turn this thing around. It happens to everybody, so hopefully at some point when we are hosting this show, the Bears will be a little bit more relevant. But here's what we wanted to do tonight, with it being New Year's Day and everything. We wanted to talk about our New Year's resolutions for the Chicago Bears. All right, so what do we want to see in 2025 for the Bears? What are our goals? What moves we want them to do and everything? And I can just open it up broadly, or we can start by talking about one topic that I'm sure is going to come up, and that's the GM position.
Well, I'll throw you guys a little curveball and give you a little tease to an article that I'm writing, for allchgo.com. And I've come to the conclusion here recently, just from a fan's perspective, that it's time to retire the Green Bay sucks chant. And I've been a big Green Bay sucks guy. Like, I would go to Wrigley, walking through. It's like one of the main traditions as Bears fans. So you're walking to the stadium at Soldier Field, you go through the tunnel, you chant it as per tradition. But it has started to kind of lose its luster a little bit. And, it is just something that's kind of tongue-in-cheek fun. We understand they don't suck, and we do. But at the same time, like, it is starting to wear out its welcome. And then I think it kind of all came to a head on the Thursday night football game, where the fans were no longer chanting Green Bay sucks. They were chanting sell the team. And, that, and then when fans were leaving through the tunnel, they were not chanting Green Bay sucks. They were chanting sell the team. And so I think, like, since the 2018 season, and then the expectations kind of ramped up. And as we went through these failures of like Mitch Trubisky and the 2019 Bears and the whole Matt Nagy era, through Justin Fields and all the hope and the letdown with, that run. And now here with Caleb, I just think it's kind of made a turn. Bears fans have always kind of been finicky, but I just feel like the angst amongst the fan base is at a level that I've never really seen before. And so to me, I think it is time to retire it. Maybe we bring it back one day, but I just think at this point as fans, this team is just an embarrassment every single year. And we always wait for the primetime games to put out our most embarrassing performances.
Yeah.
And I feel like we as fans kind of help add to this embarrassing perception by chanting. And this is a full meatball you're talking
right.
to, you know,
right.
like this is something I've always really enjoyed, but it's just, I think it's starting to look like, to me, it's like the wave. When fans start doing the wave at baseball games in Chicago, the fans like hate it. We do not do the wave, either side of town, whether you're at Comiskey or at Wrigley. Like, we understand, like, watch the game, pay attention to the game. And I think that's kind of where Green Bay sucks is trending now. Like, let's stop chanting it and start worrying about what's right in front of us on the field and start focusing our angst at the Bears until they get their shit right, and stop worrying about Green Bay, who doesn't suck,
right,
and stop looking like idiots because we do.
Yeah. No, interesting. It's, to me, it comes full circle. I mean, you talked about what you were doing during karaoke tonight while Ohio State was curb stomping Oregon. Mm-hmm. Well, what is Ohio State's Achilles heel been the last 3 years? Ryan Day's Achilles heel. It's been Michigan. Right. They have been obsessed with Michigan. And LaCharles Bentley on Twitter recently was like, you guys got to stop making this about Michigan and make it about being you and your best self. Mm-hmm. And when you make it about something else, which, to your point, you know, we're ours. And I mean, in the back of my head, I'm thinking if we win this game on Sunday, the whole season is a victory for me because I hate Green Bay so much. But to your point, yeah, we need to worry about what's in front of us, how we're going to run a competent organization and win football games before we should even put ourselves in that, you know, in that.
It's a mindset thing. If we want to stop being the little brothers in this rivalry, we got to stop acting like it. Right.
Yep, I'm with you.
If you follow anything with Purdue basketball and Indiana Hoosiers and that rivalry that's been going on for 40 years, well, Purdue's been the little brother for years. And anybody that's familiar with their traditions, they used to do this. The band would play this song called Hailfire. And at the end, it would be like this long thing during a TV timeout. And the fans have like a dance to it. And at the very end, they yell, "IU sucks." And it's like, bah, 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 bah. And this was when IU was never there. And this always just fed into this moniker that they were the little brothers to IU. As IU was winning games, Purdue's just chanting that IU sucks. And it wasn't true. Well, guess what? Now Purdue is the team that has their shit together. They're, you know, become like the golden age of Purdue basketball. They're focused on themselves. They're focused on trying to get to Final Fours, which they finally got to last year. They've had two players go in the top 10 of the NBA draft the last few years with Jaden Ivey and Zach Edey, and they don't do Hailfire anymore. They don't chant IU sucks. And guess where IU is right now? They're the team scrambling to figure out who they are. They're the team that only worries about Purdue. The only hope they have at the end of the year is to root for Purdue's failures. Sound familiar? That's all we have. We have this January. All we have is to root.
I'm drinking over here. Cheers,
our team. Right. All we have, cheers, is to root against our division rivals because we're not there.
Right.
And so there's a lot of things that we can get to in New Year's resolution that the team needs to do. But I also think as fans, we need to look inward. And so I've done my couple New Year's resolutions are I'm not doing the Green Bay sucks chant anymore. And the other things I'm not going to do is I'm not going to oversell the hype and the hope going into the season. It is a wait and see approach. If they hire Ben Johnson, I'm not going to hate on it. They hire Mike Vrabel, I'm not going to hate on it. Whoever they decide at coach, I'm not going to hate on it. But I'm also not going to get ahead of my skis until we actually get to the season and we see what the results are. I tried to have this promise to myself going into last year and completely failed. By the time I got to training camp, by the time I got to the season, it was like I was just all in. You know, it's hope springs eternal. Every year we get to the training camp, and the closer I get to the season, the more ridiculous I start to act. So this year, I'm going to keep myself honest because it just always leads to this huge letdown where I'm trying to fire everyone on our third post-game show. So I'm looking at the things I can control and hold up my end of the bargain here as a Bears fan. And then we can figure out what the Bears need to do.
Yeah. It feels like we've gradually been coping with where we're at in this so-called rivalry the last few years. You know, like going into this season, we all felt this hype that the Bears could win 9 or 10 games, maybe more, you know, just based on how last year finished and everything. And obviously that's all been out the window. But even going in, when we were writing the articles, Bryan, at Windy City Gridiron, Like nobody picked the Bears to win against the Packers in either game. Nobody did. And everyone has kind of come to terms with, I am not ever picking the Bears to beat Green Bay until they finally start beating the team again. So there was like that coping mechanism. Now to what you're saying, Braggs, not even going to do the chant anymore because it's been we haven't beat them in 6 years. You know, I mean, the last 15 has just been so one-sided. It's ridiculous.
Well, look at the Packers. Look at the Packers against the Saints. 34-0. They're on Monday Night Football. Packers fans are like responding to us by this new chant they're doing that says where they yell the Bears still suck. And they were chanting it on Monday Night Football. And their PA announcer came on and said, please be quiet. The Packers are on offense. We live in two different worlds. And that's what I mean. Like their priorities are about winning and our priorities are just all over the place. Of course, we want nothing more than a winner, but at the same time, I just think there's a focus there from organization. Like we always talk about this trickle down it starts at the top. We understand that. We're not responsible for the failures on the field. Yeah. But at the same time, I do believe in kind of this mindset. And like I said, when I looked at the way Purdue's culture has completely changed and that how they flip that rivalry, I do think it does start at the top. It trickles down to the coaches and the players, but I also think it comes down to a fan base mentality too. And we see that here in this city between the Cubs and the White Sox fan base rivalry, right? And you know your team isn't good enough when you're worried about someone else. And when your team is, you're focused on yourself. And I think at some point we got to start doing that as fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am so tired of watching these playoff games every year, rooting against the teams I don't like rather than rooting for my team. It's getting just unbelievably old. Yeah, and here we are again. Every NFC North team but us. You know,
it's going to be tricky to get through this year's playoffs with all three in there. Like how we're going to get the Eagles, and we hate the Eagles here in Chicago for everything they've put us through, and they're like our one hope to keep the NFC North out of the Super Bowl.
Dude, I was just talking to somebody about this with, you know, all the other NFC North teams that seemingly always make the playoffs. Of course, Green Bay, a lot of years for a long time, Minnesota was always in there. It's so wild how for so many years, you would think just from statistical odds, especially when it was just 6 playoff teams, that they would have went to the Super Bowl more. So we've kind of, as a fan base, kind of dodged some bullets here of watching all of our rivals go to multiple Super Bowls, because it seems like every single year the same teams from the NFC North are good, and yet, you know, we've got that one Green Bay Super Bowl in 2010. Minnesota hasn't been in like almost 50 years, but they're in the playoffs. They're just in it so many times. You would think just like once in a while, maybe it'll be this year, you know, but once in a while you would think they would just get in just by the odds of being one of the 6-7 teams.
Yeah, I still think the Lions are getting there. I think they have that look of focus, and they've had a lot of injuries. They give up a lot of points now on defense, but they just don't stop. They keep coming at you, and I think they have that look of a team that's trying to get back to the point they were last year and right that wrong, because they blew it. They blew it last year, and I think they knew it. And when that game ended last year against the 49ers, and I'm a big Dan Campbell guy. I love his mentality and the culture he's built there in Detroit. When they lost to the Niners and they blew it, they asked him about getting back. He's like, well, we may never get back. Mm-hmm. Like, that was the first thing he said after the game. And like, I respect the hell out of that kind of mentality, to not take things for granted, to not sugarcoat things. Like, what would Matt Eberflus say in that moment? Well, we'll be back. We'll be, always trying to, find the positive. But, I think the cynical ones, the ones that are bloodthirsty to be great, they focus on, like what is in their way. They're not trying to cope, and I think there's too much coping going on at times here in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you can go wrong rooting for something like that with Detroit. Detroit has never. So funny story is, I'm a Bears fan because of the Lions, Braggs. My older brother is a Lions fan. And so when we started watching football, he was Barry Sanders and I was Lions. In fact, I got this too. I'm big Michigan fan. So the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry is big. This is one of my favorite books growing up. The Fab Five was like my favorite team of all time. And that rivalry, really similar to Green Bay, Chicago, as far as historical value and the quality of programs. Michigan was was way behind in that rivalry for years until
Yep.
Harbaugh came around.
Yep.
And he made that thing focused on us being the best program we can be. And Ryan Day and Ohio State was all focused on screw Michigan, we hate Michigan. And we saw how that turned around. But back to the Lions, you know, they've not been a powerful organization. They've had a few players, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Ndamukong Suh, a few players that I genuinely just did not like for the way they played on the field. But it's an NFC North team, similar fan base, you know, blue collar, and Campbell, like you said, you know, he's seems like a blue collar guy himself. Then you got Ben Johnson, who's just bringing out masterful plays, and that's another thing too. Is if he ends up being our head coach, how great would it be to have a coach who has coached at the highest level and succeeded?
Yep.
So there's a lot to like about the Lions, and
that's an interesting point too, because like I think at this point we're rooting for the Lions to win on Sunday against the Vikings to have the number 1 seed, so they have the bye,
so the
Bears can interview them. But then I think there's also a lot of Bears fans that would prefer the Lions to have an early exit so that the Bears can hire Ben Johnson as fast as possible. But let's say Ben Johnson definitely is your guy and he wants to come here. Wouldn't you rather him get to the Super Bowl and call plays in the biggest moment to have that experience
against the best defense?
Against the best defense, because then when he comes over here, he has that.
Right.
He understands the prep of going from an NFC championship, getting those 2 weeks of the Super Bowl melee and all the pomp and circumstance that comes with that, and then preparing to beat, you know, what's probably going to be the Kansas City Chiefs as it is every year. Like, to that point, I think before I was thinking it probably would work out if there's an early exit, but now the way you're selling it, now I almost wish if he is our future head coach, I'd prefer him to get to the Super Bowl so he has that experience under his belt for when he comes here.
And with that said, too, the first round bye is still nice because we can interview him, at least our first interview, and have that completed before he gets the Super Bowl. All right, real quick interjection.
Let's see this beer. Yeah.
I've been saving this for a special occasion. It's the only one I got. It's a Żywiec Porter. It's a Polish porter, Braggs.
Okay.
I need to make this full screen. Hang on.
Let
me try.
If you like dark beers, this is your beer. It's 9.5%. It comes in a 500 ml glass. So it's a big boy, 9.5%. And they sell it at Flo and Santos, just west of the stadium. Yep. So if you ever get a chance to,
I've been to Flo and Santos.
Oh, please check it out. Try one of these bad boys and think of me and your Polish Bears friend. And I'm on my second drink already. I don't know what you guys are doing. Cheers.
Brian's gonna be on the floor here pretty soon.
Well, I'm like I said, I'm not much of a beer guy, but the Dark Lords beer is a big thing in our area. I don't know if you guys have ever waited in line. Yeah, the Three Floyds, and when they release, it's like a limited. They don't ever, and when they do, it's like what was the old festival in the '60s that everybody went to? What am I thinking of? Come on,
Woodstock.
Yeah, it's like Woodstock.
Yeah.
It's like Woodstock in the region when they released the Three Floyds, and everybody gets in line for Dark Lords Day or whatever they call it. So maybe one day that's what that reminded me of, is like the dark beer.
You're gonna love it. Brewery. I promise you. Try it out. Go to Flo and Santos. Ryan, if you're ever there, do it. It is easily my number one beer of choice worldwide, and we like beers, Braggsy. I like bourbon too, but we're kind of beer snobs if you must, and this absolutely is worth it. Hard to come by, but Flo and Santos has got you covered.
All right.
Yeah, to wrap up what you're talking about, Braggs, with Green Bay and everything, I almost felt like, I was at the week 1 game against Tennessee, and after the game, going through the tunnels, everyone was chanting it again, and I almost felt uncomfortable at that moment because that opening game was such a disaster.
Yep.
It's like, oh my God, we looked terrible. Everybody looked terrible, and then everyone's like jacked up, Green Bay sucks. I'm like, we might suck. I don't know if I want to be chanting this. So
yeah. It's tone deaf, I hate to be the wet blanket, but I think there is a large percentage of the fan base that is kind of done with it. And then there's the ones that just like, hey, this is our tradition. Let us have fun. And I'm not trying to stop people, but like I was trying, like I put in the article, are we having like, yes, sports are supposed to be fun. Is anyone having fun? Because these last 12 months have been miserable. Yeah. Like between the whole Fields versus Caleb, fiasco and fighting between the fan base. Then you get to the offseason. I feel like maybe there was a 2-month period where we all started to get along for a minute.
Hard knocks.
And then as soon as the Titans game happened, it was back to killing each other. And now this season has just been a train wreck. The team is ripping itself apart. And all 3 teams in our division are in the playoffs. Like this season, it's not the worst Bears season of all time, but it's easily the most embarrassing and the most disappointing. We just
talked about that on the show a couple of weeks ago. I was going to ask you that. Where does this rank for you as far as your most disappointing Bears seasons? You just said it. Is it the most for you?
I would have to say so. Yeah. I mean, the 2019 Bears certainly is right there. But man, that let out of air like week 1, right? I mean, this dragged along into the middle of the season, and the amount of devastating, disappointing last-second losses.
Right.
Like normally we have like 1 in a year that you look at, and this year there's been like 5.
Yeah.
And so when you add it all together, and then you look at the disaster that was the coaching staff and everything that was, on the table for Caleb Williams here in his rookie year. We can't even fully enjoy his rookie season. And he's done a lot of positive things. Now I've tried to push back with people like, hey, don't sell me that this has been a great year for him, even though there's a lot of statistics that would point to he's on par with so many great quarterbacks in their rookie year. The eye test week to week does not sell you that.
Exactly.
So it's just, for me, it has been as disappointing a year as I've come across. And honestly, to a point, a very unlikable team. When you look at the second year of the Trestman era, and how that team, I think that was probably the most unlikable team I've ever rooted for, where you had all these guys fighting each other, Martellus Bennett, Brandon Marshall, Jay Cutler, that entire team just wanted to kill each other. That second year, and the defense, they just kind of had met the end of the line with how old they were, and Mel Tucker couldn't have been a worse defensive coordinator. So that season just fell apart from a culture standpoint, and so it was disappointing and unlikable, and that's kind of where this team has gone. They're just so disappointing. The losses have been so devastating, and then you also have them airing out all this dirty laundry through the media. Matt Eberflus just became very unlikable when he got to the end of the line there. And then when you look at what Jaden Daniels is doing, and you're looking at freaking Bo Nix
and Harbaugh.
And Harbaugh. Absolutely. All those things combined, like this has just been probably the most miserable season to be a Bears fan. Yeah. And all 3 NFC North teams having the success they're having. It's ridiculous, and we deserve better.
And cheers to that, because I definitely want to honor and agree with you there. Commiserate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so first of all, preface this, Braggsy, is I'm an eternal optimist. Everybody that's ever worked with me, I've had a number of different careers like you. I'm just that guy. I don't do it by choice. I'm not a rainbows and unicorns guy, even though I got 4 daughters. That's my life now. I kind of see it that way. They're my team, and I see I have the eyeball test. And even though Caleb might not have a statistical good day, I see the reads that he's making and the throws that he's making and the adjustments and the growth on the sideline, throwing the ball out after trying to get as much as he can, or hurrying up the play to get a snap because there's 12 men on the defense. And I see these things that I have not seen from a quarterback, which is the most important position in all of sports. And I am excited. Now, as far as the team being unlikable, I agree with you at this point. But when we were winning, that wasn't the case. Winning cures a multitude of sins.
Sure.
And had we won those Hail Mary games in the fourth quarter and the block field goal, had we won those games, I think there would be no such issues. But we're there. Now, here's the optimist in me. And so me and Mason West might be the only people remaining on this earth that are still warm to the idea of Poles returning. Because I feel, Braggsy, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. I feel he's been calculated in his approach long term with free agents and draft picks, knowing what free agents are going to be available in the offseason to come and what draft picks are going to be available in the offseason to come. Summarizing it as which positions, especially in free agency and the draft, are stronger in which years. I think Poles has been aware of that. I think he's addressed his offseason plans with that in mind. And this coming offseason is all about the trenches. I feel like it's always been that. And yes, we say that now, and some of us might think that's hindsight, but F that. I told my 9-year-old daughter, who is now watching the Bears and liking the Bears, and it's been really tough, and we all know that. But baby, next year is when I said from the beginning of the year, next year is when we're going to really be good. This year, we're supposed to be okay. We should be all right. But next year, because the trenches, it's a strong free agent class as far as offensive line, at least. And then the draft, we've got multiple picks. So I feel like we are right there, guys. When our team was healthy, we should have beat the Lions. We should have beat the Packers, and we should have beat the Vikings. And yes, I'm as tired as every one of you for should have fucking winning games and not winning them. That's what we do, right? I'm with you there. But the reality is this team that we have now with the players and the deficit in talent now has competed with the best of the best. Yeah. And so add some more talent there with Caleb Williams and another growth and maybe a play caller who can actually call to his strengths and the strengths of his teammates. Guys, that's a reason. That's a reason to drink. That's a reason to be happy for what's to come, and it's a reason to maybe get too hyped because it's looking good. Now, what happens?
This man can always make me feel better about the Bears. Unbelievable.
What happens between now and draft time is really curious. I sent Ryan a tweet right before we got on, and there was who was the guy? One of the local beat reporters, Braggsy, was saying that Poles is trying to talk leadership out of Ben Johnson. That concerns me.
It was sourced from Walter Football, I think.
No,
so I don't know how valid it was, but
no, it was someone else local. It was
yeah, he was quoting another report though.
Okay,
I read. I think it was from Walter Football is where it was sourced
Eric Lambert.
I mean, dude. Yeah, he aggregated it from there. I don't know how valid that is.
Well, the only thing I found interesting about that report, and I get everybody's dismissing it, but you never know where people hear stuff.
Right.
And even if somebody that doesn't have a great track record, sometimes they can come across something. Because the one thing I did find interesting about that report was the specific of where, and this was Charlie Campbell from that Walter report or whatever you want to say. And he said that, Ben Johnson wants the assistant GM Lance Newmark as the GM. Newmark was with Johnson in Detroit, and that's a name I hadn't heard yet. So that was just such a specific nugget. And that's what I was telling my buddy. I'm like, well, maybe it's nothing, but I do find it interesting that he connected that dot, and I haven't heard anybody else bring that up. So why would he throw that name into the ring? So be it. Maybe it's nothing. Obviously Poles has a history with Brian Flores, and so does Kevin Warren from his Minnesota days. So that was the other half of that report. So I don't know. It's certainly going to be interesting. And I think that's the whole point, right? You're talking about personnel. You're talking about what they have ability in free agency with cap spending and draft equity. And I get all that. They had all that last year. And I don't expect the GM to be perfect. If you look at Kwesi, what he's done in Minnesota, they've had 2, 13-win seasons here the last 3 years. The Bears haven't had one of those in 15 years. But if you look at Kwesi's first draft with Minnesota, it wasn't good. He didn't do a great job, but they're still a good organization. So I don't expect my GM to be perfect. He's going to make mistakes. The Nate Davis signing was atrocious. Trading for Chase Claypool was atrocious. Not putting enough emphasis into the offensive line. You can point to that. I don't have a problem with them drafting Rome Odunze at 9. I understand people's frustration for that. But I'm still fine with Rome being on this team. He gambled to see if he could have a hold me over offensive line for a year and see if it would survive. And guess what? It didn't survive. Why? Obviously injury was a big part of it, but more importantly
Talent
was the coaching is the thing that scares me about Ryan Poles.
Right.
And if you're telling me Ryan Poles is going to come back, okay, fine. I don't have anything against Ryan Poles. I happen to like Ryan Poles a lot. And some of the things you talk about where his calculated approach and things, I see some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But there's been no calculation with the way he's helped build these coaching staffs. And I'm not just blaming Matt Eberflus. This is on your watch too.
Oh, right.
You hire Matt Eberflus. Your finalists are Dan Quinn, Jim Caldwell and Matt Eberflus. You don't even interview a guy like Kevin O'Connell, who's now, one of the better coaches in your division.
In the league too.
And you finish with Matt Eberflus. Dan Quinn's now in Washington doing a good job there. And oh, by the way the process, David Kaplan came out a few weeks ago and said they flew Dan Quinn out and coach. This is the other part of our organization. Like when just it's a bad look. And so you hire Matt Eberflus, you hire Luke Getsy, who didn't, it's not like Matt Eberflus came in here and had this whole coaching tree that came along with him. They just hired Luke Getsy because he came from the Shanahan tree, right? He's a guy that, was off of this offense that they wanted to run. But did he have any real ties with Matt Eberflus? The answer was no.
Yeah. And to make your point even worse or accentuated is Poles was blown away by Getsy and his answers to the questions on how he was going to prepare game plans. So, I mean, that adds credence. And I think you're right. I think Poles had too much faith in Matt Eberflus.
Right. And then you fast forward. Okay, I can understand the logic of not firing Matt Eberflus 12 months ago. All fans wanted them to change the coaching staff. Most fans wanted them to hire Jim Harbaugh. I guarantee Bryan did as a Michigan fan and saw what he did for the Michigan program. I did too. But if you want to say, well, it was never going to happen because he was going to LA. And so the Bears didn't really have any other options out there. So they ran it back with Eberflus. Fine. I can come around to that logic, even if I didn't agree with it. But then what do? You interview 10 offensive coordinators and you only bring one back for a second interview. And that guy is Shane Waldron. Shane Waldron has been an absolute disaster. You can go back and see the process of how they interviewed. And Ryan Poles did an interview here earlier this season where he talked about the process of how they asked him these questions of how situationally, how he was going to do things. And that's how they came to the conclusion that they wanted Shane Waldron. It's been a disaster. So how can I now trust Ryan Poles as much as I like the guy? There's no honest way I can trust Ryan Poles to evaluate an offensive-minded head coach when you knew this offseason, A, you hire Luke Getsy, B, then you hire Shane Waldron and this entire coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball to mold your number one pick. You can't just leave it to Matt Eberflus to make this decision. This has got to be something that is your most prized possession of your franchise, and you couldn't have put it in worse hands. Yeah. He's onto his third offensive coordinator that took 12, 14 games into the season. Yeah. And so now I have to trust you that you're going to hire Ben Johnson and convince me that that's the right guy, that for certainty that that's the right guy. So that for me is why it worries me that Ryan Poles is the right guy for the job. And they may just stick with him. Somebody put here, the chat brought up Greg Gabriel, and I thought he brought up a really good point, Greg Gabriel did, where he said, well, if they were going to fire Ryan Poles, they should have already done it because now he's a month and a half into this coaching search. So you're going to fire him on Black Monday after he's already done a lot of the homework, the advanced homework you're going to do on who you're going to hire. So I do think they're going to probably run it back with Ryan Poles, but I can't have any faith that his process is going to have the results we're looking for until he proves it.
Exactly. And you shouldn't have more faith, Bragsy. You shouldn't either, Ryan. Nobody should because we haven't been shown proof of it yet. But here's why I still have hope. We are all roughly the same age. I'm 40 years old. We're roughly around that age.
Yep.
Right? We have learned a lot in the past 5 years let alone 10. I think what's Poles like 36. He's somewhere around there. But
yeah, he's
we have
close
learned
to age. Yeah.
a crap ton about professional business life in the last 5 to 10 years that have helped us as we move forward. Poles is super young. And that alone, being young alone doesn't do crap, right? But the report that came out, how he has learned from his mistakes. And I think one of them is Waldron and his involvement with the coaching search, and then the coordinator search, and then the free agent acquisitions, and maybe taking the player for their word as opposed to reports from Vrabel, who could have been a bitter coach or an offensive coordinator or future teammates. Because what is Kevin Byard going to say about Nate Davis? I don't know. Probably not going to talk trash about him. He's trying to make everybody happy and be friends, be boys. I played ball, Braggsy, so I get this. But Poles has come across as if he's learned and been humbled by it all. And if that is the case, then the weak conservative approaches to free agency and the offensive line, like you said, like kind of gambled on it. I don't think there are going to be any more gambles. I think there are going to be some sure things, and that's another thing I feel like was in his back pocket, was making sure the cap was where it needed to be to have the flexibility to be aggressive come time for this specific offseason. I think this is the offseason where Poles finishes his piece. And I think he's learned from his mistakes, and that's what gives me trust in that. But
I get that, but the one thing I think that wasn't part of any of our calculation, where everybody's like, well, Greg, slow down this year, when I kept saying win now to start the year. And I thought this team was ready to take a step, even if it was a year early. And it was like, well, they're ready to compete next year. I think the thing that none of us took into account was how much this culture would crumble during the year. And so now it's really changed the complexion on what the need is at head coach and how important it is to kind of patch this culture back together. Because to end last year, they weren't a good team last year, but they ended last year as a connected unit, and they were really starting to come together defensively. Now this year, everything seems to be coming apart of the seams. Player after player after player is saying how they're not disciplined, they're not detail oriented, their preparation throughout the week sucks, and they're all begging to be coached harder. Kyler Gordon, Jalen Johnson, even the old timer Mercedes Lewis is talking about coaching us harder. And so, like, Ben Johnson can have all the plays in the world, but if he can't do what Dan Campbell is doing and demand, a work ethic and an attention to detail and a fire inside their belly, and that's where everybody gets frustrated with these, buzzwords, leader of men and stuff. But it is important because of what has happened with this team and how much losing has taken a toll, not on a rookie like Caleb Williams, who took his lumps, and maybe this is a great learning lesson for him this year of what the NFL can be all about, but the veterans like DJ Moore and Jalen Johnson and Montez Sweat and everybody else. Like, it just seems like these guys, and Cole Kmet, it has taken a huge toll on those guys and how much they are now in the primes of their career, and it's getting wasted by bad decision making above them that they can't control. And then now it makes them mentally let go of the rope. I mean, if they had won the Hail Mary game when Roschon Johnson ran into the end zone to take the lead, I haven't felt a stronger moment in Bears Nation since the 2018 club dub. That was the wildest moment, and you could feel the team coming together. And then in 20 seconds, it just got ripped apart, just completely ripped apart. Like, talk about how fragile the mental makeup of this team is, that it was a brutal, one of the most devastating losses they've ever occurred. But to lose 10 straight off of that, to the way it has just completely ripped itself apart, is unlike anything I've seen. And that's why where Vrabel really starts to move up into, right at the top, neck and neck with Ben Johnson, on where you can make a strong argument that as much as a guy like Ben Johnson would do wonders for this offense, that they really need somebody that's going to that's going to light a fire under these guys' asses and challenge them in the meeting rooms and in the film rooms and in the preparation and on the sidelines, that we're not going to take shit and we're not going to be soft, because that has been what this team is here in this 10-game losing streak. It's been soft, and that's the worst thing you can be as a football team. If
you were running the team, Braggs, would you fire Poles? Because I know
I'd have no choice. I'd have no choice.
Yeah.
I am a huge pro Poles guy, but I'm also a man of logic. At least I try to be, as much as a meatball can be. And when me and Hogue started to get into it, through the early part of the losing streak, and I told him, like, they need to fire Matt Eberflus right now. And Hogue was like, they're not going to, Greg, so just let it go. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm basing this statement off of logic, and they need to fire him because the players are literally airing him out every day in the media, immediately after the games, immediately in the locker room. That there's no good that can come from that. And so eventually logic won over, and they fire Matt Eberflus. And so now I'm using that same logic of why Ryan Poles cannot return as GM. And that's simply because you have three options. One, you keep him, you do not extend him, and you try to hire a head coach. Well, what good head coach is going to come here with a GM on a 1-year deal? So option two is you extend Ryan Poles to line up with your head coach and your quarterback. Well, how can you sell to any logical thinking human being that a GM that's currently on an 11-game losing streak deserves a 4-year extension? That there's no logic in that whatsoever. So the only option that is what a good business would do is to wipe the slate clean. Okay, Ryan, it may not be completely fair to you. Just like last year, it wasn't completely fair to Justin, but we have to do what's best for the organization, and we have to wipe the slate clean and let a head coach come in here with a GM where they're paired together. And, we can't justify giving you a 4-year deal when you have a 14-game losing streak on your resume and now a current 11-game losing streak on your resume. They're probably going to go that direction. That seems like the betting odds are that way, but logically it's not anything you can actually sell to anyone as the 100% right decision. Now, will I be rooting for it all to work out? Yes. Just like I did with Eberflus last year. I didn't think it was logical to be bringing Eberflus back last year, but I was also rooting for it to work out for him. Right. So I'll be rooting for Ryan Poles going forward if they keep him, but you can't sell to me that that's the logical decision they should be making.
Yeah, that's kind of where I've been too. Coming into the season, I had a lot of faith in him and the team because it looked like he had put together a strong roster that could compete for the playoffs this year and then really kick the door in next year. That's why I always felt like, to Brian's point, we all said going in, then in one more off season, you fix the O-line. We thought it was going to be serviceable this year. There's been injuries, but we'll fix the O-line, add an edge rusher next year. Then they can really compete, maybe be in the contender phase. It hasn't worked out that way. And I'm with you, Braggs. My biggest problem is that, you're going after one of these blue chip coaches. And I don't feel comfortable extending his contract at this point. Doesn't seem practical, because if he's not the dude, and we really don't have a good general manager, you add on to that, then we're just digging a deeper hole every single year. And it feels kind of like, to me, I pulled up here the draft picks. If you guys can see those on the screen, these are all the drafts that Ryan Poles has had. There's so much what if here. And I want more just no doubt superstars. We're going through this with Caleb right now, where we all think he's the dude because eyeball test, in spite of the different stats you can point to and say, look, he's doing this thing that no Bears rookie's ever done, and this is where he ranks against the other rookies and so on. Well, the optimal thing coming into the season was he went out there, he lit it up. There was no question he was the guy. Instead, we've had to contend. You log into social media, all you see is Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, even Drake May, and it's like, I just wanted the Bears to have the guy who everybody no doubt knew was that dude. And although we believe that, the rest of the NFL doesn't, unfortunately. And we're going to have to wait a whole another year. And we're going to see this all in the offseason of people saying, oh, he's a bust, whatever. It's going to be sweeter if he does end up being the Pro Bowler that we think he can be. But for a while, it's going to be really annoying. And when you look at these draft picks, and you look at the names, there's a lot of potential, but as far as no doubt picks that he has, Darnell's been pretty solid for sure. Dexter looks like he's going to be pretty good for us. I mean, Tyreek fell off a lot this year.
So I want to make a
Roschon was
point
a solid pick.
Real quick about Tyreek. I think Tyreek Stevenson has been just grossly mismanaged, Braggs, because I also have coached in my day. And I really pay attention to that. And I feel like it came to a head, an interesting head, when we played the Lions last. And there was that little spat with Jameson Williams on the sideline, who has actually had more of a controversial history in the league than Tyreek.
Yep.
But Jameson Williams is turning it up, and he is looking like a legitimate pro and one of those nailed it draft picks, when Tyreek is going on the downward trend with that. And I think the Hail Mary play and the discipline involved and how they bench him for like 3 snaps the next game, and then they rotate him a couple games, and now he's been playing every single game since, every snap. That was wildly mismanaged as an opportunity for a coaching staff to develop a young person, and I think we're seeing that. To my point, also, I want to add one more thing. We talk about leader of men and Dan Campbell and Mike Vrabel. Anybody that's been in any sort of leadership knows that you're only as good as those in leadership beneath you. It is not all about you. It essentially is about your assistant coaches. And in this regard, now the year 2018, when we were on fire, we had Vic Fangio, we had Brandon Staley, we had Sean Desai, we had all these assistant coaches. They keep the players in line, accountable, on task during the week. That's their job. The head coach, absolutely, he sets the standard, he sets the culture, the minimum bar. That's his job. But the assistant coaches is where success happens, in my opinion. And that's where we have failed recently. Well, we failed everywhere recently, but the assistant coaches is where it's big. So if we can get a guy like Ben Johnson, who knows which coaches from Detroit, a winning organization, to bring with him, I have more confidence. At that point, I am happy if he decides he's okay with polls or not, which is another option, Braggsy, is if they say, okay, Ben Johnson, we'll hire you. What do you want? You've heard what Ryan Poles has to say. Are you convinced? Are you confident? Are you in line with the direction that he wants to take this team? If yes, he stays. If no, he goes. If that's what they say, I'm totally on board with that.
Well, and somebody asked me, they asked, hey, for a topic next week on CHGO Bears, would you guys do something like, what would you ask Ben Johnson, like in an interview? And I think the number one thing I'd ask him, like as a setup, and what I'd hope to hear the answer of, so I'll say both, is how would you have handled the Tariq Stevenson situation? And for me, what I hope the answer would be, as I see how Ben Johnson is so detailed with the tape and sees how the Bears can fall for a stumble against the Packers a year ago and use that as a play for stumble bum a year later. So I would hope that Ben Johnson's answer wouldn't be what he would do after the Hail Mary. It would be, well, Tyreek Stevenson poked a dude in the eye in week 2 of the regular season against the Texans. He poked Nico Collins in the eye and he got a penalty for it. And that's where I would nip it in the bud. We would make sure we address this before we even get to the Hail Mary.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because once you get to the Hail Mary, now you're in a real tough spot and you got to make a decision. So, you can have the obvious, I bench him or I do this and that. But it's about getting ahead of those things.
Even last year.
Right. And Tyreek's, a competitor and a guy that gets real fiery, and you got to have that chip on your shoulder mentality, but you got to know where the line is drawn. And to your point about this little rivalry between him and Jameson Williams, well, you saw how Dan Campbell pulled Jameson Williams to the side and was like, just pleading with him. You cannot do this. Well, what did Jameson Williams do? A few plays later, he burns Tyreek Stevenson over the top for a 75, 80-yard touchdown. Exactly. And so that is what we're missing in terms of leadership. And you can't let it get away from you where he pokes a guy in Nico Collins in the eye week 2. The Hail Mary against Washington, earlier in that fourth quarter, Tyreek Stevenson poked a dude in the eye and got a personal foul in that game. So it's a repeat offender of something. And in that moment, when he got that penalty in Washington, that was a huge penalty. They ended up not getting right. They ended up not getting burned by it, but it almost, turned into something that extended a drive that could have ended or, stopped the Bears' comeback. And so then it ends up, the chickens come home to roost in the Hail Mary. So to me, that would be what the hope of my answer would be from a guy like Ben Johnson, because I know how Mike Vrabel's going to handle it. I know how Mike Vrabel's going to handle it. And Adam Hogue had an opportunity to talk to Kevin Byard in the locker room today for about 7 minutes, and they talked strictly about Vrabel. And so I'd encourage anybody to go back and listen to it, but you can hear how he's going to air you out when you come off the sidelines. They're going to air it out when they are in the film room. And honestly, that's what all these guys, that Caleb included, they all need this.
Right.
They need it. And so if Ben Johnson isn't that type of dude, then to your point, he better hire a bunch of assistant coaches that are those dudes.
Right.
And I'm not saying it has to be Vrabel, but you have to have guys on your staff that are going to hold these dudes accountable. And obviously we're not getting that from this coaching staff, because even when Thomas Brown, who we were all excited to see his opportunity to become interim head coach, and then he comes in and they play San Francisco and they get, dog walked. And by the end of it, they get an interception. You have the safety, get an interception, Owens, and Jonathan Owens, and they run to the other sidelines.
So bad.
Like that was an opportunity for Thomas Brown right there to go, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
Get over here.
Yeah.
You're just like the Green Bay sucks chant. We're already embarrassing ourselves with this game. We're not going to continue to embarrass ourselves with these kind of antics. Have a higher standard for yourself. Yep. And that starts with the coaching staff. And so, Ben, I think the last few weeks I feel like he's kind of gotten that message of, we want to see who you are as a coach, because you're seeing a lot more animation in fire. Yeah. I think he hears it. I think he hears it, and he's trying to show who he is. My hope is that that's not a forced thing.
Right.
That's not a scripted thing he's doing, because we all like it, right? Because we're just hoping he's the one. But
I mean,
we won't know until next October.
Exactly. Yeah. And just because you're loud or you're angry doesn't mean shit, really. And just because he's in the locker room with Campbell, and I got to tell you, I mean, this might make me lose points as a Bears fan or what, but I love those post-game speeches by Campbell. And I admit it. My brother is a huge Lions fan, and so I'm on a thread with him and some family, and they share it almost every week, because they are gold to be in that locker room, and the way he authentically connects with and embraces his players. It's a genuine from the heart, not scripted moment for a team to just galvanize. And that's why I'm with you, Braggs. I think you can't overlook them. Now, in the back of my head, yes, I'm actually hoping that the Bills or someone like that wins it all. I don't want Detroit to win it, but I don't have a problem with them going. But man, and even though Ben has been around Dan and seen the way he manages, that doesn't mean that he can do it either. That doesn't mean he can pick the right assistant. It has to be
authentic. It has to be. Players are they want authenticity.
Yeah.
They want to be treated like pros. They want to be treated like men, but they also want to follow somebody that's authentic. And I think that's what we learned with Matt Eberflus, with all his nicknames and his hits philosophy and everything. It was a lot of gimmick, but it wasn't enough authenticity. And I think when you looked at Hard Knocks, I think the biggest tell was when he had the party at his house, and he's dressed like he had the same outfit one of the players had on. And it was just like, that's not who you are, Matt. I know it's a silly thing. It's a little thing, but it's a tell that you're not comfortable who you are, right? Like Dan Campbell's just going to be sitting there in his blue jeans, spitting, chewing tobacco. Like he doesn't give a shit that he's on Hard Knocks. He doesn't care what his players think of him or how he's dressed. And, and I just think Eberflus was kind of lost in this, makeover of the offseason. But you know what? He needed to make over, his
internal
approach as a head coach.
Yeah.
Because
Lake Forest becomes Hollywood. That was unbelievable.
And they all knew that Shane Waldron was an issue in the summer. Keenan Allen said it on a podcast with David Kaplan. And they talked about how, in minicamp, they were like, this guy is not hard enough on us on the details. So these things they knew, and that falls on Matt Eberflus. That falls on Ryan Poles, because after every practice, if you ever go to Hallis Hall and watch a training camp, they all go in a little powwow circle and talk after every single practice. So there's no excuse of how any of this snuck up on them. And they sat on their hands for too long and waited to address it. And I think the final part of this whole equation of trying to figure out what the right move is here to make is this is an organizational issue beyond the GM and the head coach and the quarterback and whether they can get first downs or touchdowns or beat the teams in their division, which is all the things on the table for what they have to do next year. The other problem with this organization is George McCaskey.
The team.
Right. And they're not going to sell the team. And if that's the case, well, George needs to have some soul searching and understand that the priorities are just completely out of whack. And, you know, making sure they don't swear on Hard Knocks might be a little thing, but it's symbolic of not being focused on being a football serious organization and not worrying about your perception, and stop acting like Hallis Hall is some sacred church and you, George, are the Pope walking around. This is football, and you need some nasty in that room. And you might not like how Olin talks, but Olin also had the respect of every single one of those guys in the locker room. We don't have one Olin Kreutz on this entire team. We got way too many choir boys, way too many good guys. I thought
Kevin would be it, but I don't know. He seemed to actually taper off. Do you guys see that too?
Yeah, he's got a nastiness on the field, but from a leadership in the locker room standpoint, he was interviewed before the season, and he asked who the leader. He was asked who the leader on the locker room, who on the offensive line was. I think Pat, the designer, asked him this, and his answer was Ryan Bates. Ryan Bates just got here. How is he the leader on your offensive line? And that's what I mean. Like Darnell Wright, very talented, but is quiet. Braxton Jones, obviously very quiet. Tevin Jenkins, very quiet. I think the most fire we saw on the offensive line during the entire season was when Coleman Shelton turned around at Caleb Williams. Goes, we got fucking fire, man. Yeah. You know, and that was a refreshing moment because one of the bigger problems of the reasons they've had so many sacks this year is the communication between the center and the quarterback, and understanding the protections and understanding which way your run fits are going. Are you going bouncing outside zone? Are you inside zone? And what the look based off of what you see from a defensive front.
Right.
And so that was a refreshing moment where he goes, Caleb's calling out the play. And Coleman's like, are you crazy? We got fucking fire here. How are you running this right here? And Caleb goes, I got you. Because he knew it's an RPO and he was going to keep it and throw it to Rome. But at least there was communication there.
Right.
We do not have enough of that adult communication where they can swear at each other for a minute, be hot, but understand it's because they all are in a place. There's too many people that I feel like with across this entire team that are afraid to get in each other's faces for a minute.
Yeah.
And hurt each other's feelings. And that's why we got to find this in our coaching staff.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. And to that extent, I can see why Ben Johnson might not be the guy. But at the end of the day, what it all boils down for me is even if a Vrabel or a Belichick, if he were still available, it doesn't matter. What's your plan with the offense? Because if it's not good enough, then I'm not interested. Like so at Windy City Gridiron, we've gone back and forth. Which, by the way, there's like a thing that like people start the thread. Commenting is big in Windy City Gridiron, Braggsy, and people start the threads often with F Green Bay, and that's the same. It's run out its course. It's no longer like move on. We got to grow up. But as far as Caleb Williams is concerned, and this team moving forward, and I just. It matters, like to me, as if we can get an offense that can score points and outscore the opponent, that's all that I care about. I don't care about how cohesive, how hard-nosed the locker room is. If we can score points, then we can win games. And if we can win games, then we're where I want to be and where Caleb needs to be. Because we have the talent on defense as is. And now I understand. I actually have been on record of saying I think defensive tackle might be our most glaring need on the whole team. So I know the roster shortages on defensive line, specifically D tackle, and then obviously edge across from Sweat. But as is, our defense has got some talent there. We've got talent enough to deal with itself, put a somewhat of a coordinator in charge there. Focus on the offense. And that's my problem with a Vrabel or anybody else. You have to sell me, and that's where I don't trust polls. Sell me on what your plan is for the offense, because Waldron wasn't it. Liam Cohen, Joe Brady, those are great, but they already got jobs. Who's the next guy? And that's the thing and that's where offense it struggles. That's where I struggle with.
If you had Mike Vrabel, but your offensive coordinator was Brian Daboll, or your offensive coordinator was Josh McDaniels, a couple guys that know what they're doing.
McDaniels, fuck no. Daboll, yes, please.
Well, to me, I wouldn't hate Josh McDaniels as an offensive coordinator. He's part of a team that's won 6 Super Bowls, and he's never going to be a head coach ever again.
Yeah.
So there's stability there. So I certainly going to be an upgrade from anything we're used to. He's also not somebody that's afraid to tell people how he feels.
Yeah.
Whether it's right or wrong.
True.
So
as long as he's not head coach, I guess you're right there.
So I think there's some potential options there.
The problem with polls, again, I'm just not comfortable that he's going to get this coaching hire correct. And if they don't get it correct, like that's Caleb's time with the Bears. He'll
exactly
3 years, 2-3 years, he's going to be looked at as a bust. They're not going to re-sign him if they don't get it out of him, and then he's going to go off, and maybe he'll become Sam Darnold somewhere else. But I'm
not worried about Caleb. Look at what he's done this year with the most turmoil team that we just said. It's like the most disappointing, unlikable team we've been through. That 3 offensive coordinators, 2 head coaches, and look at how he's, this is like, if this is his, floor
bottom,
right.
And this is the 5th best offensive season for a quarterback in franchise history.
Exactly.
I like personally, I'm not that worried about Caleb. Now, if you hit on Ben Johnson, that means you're taking Caleb Williams to not just where you're not worried about him as a productive quarterback, but now he's, instead of being Jay Cutler, he's in the upper echelon, the top 5 area, which is what, when you draft a guy number 1, that's your hope.
Right.
But also, we just also are hoping that it's not a complete bust, right? And I think we're past that at this point.
Well, that goes back to the Green Bay sucks change. What is our expectation as a fan? I mean, that's what I'm saying, Bragsy, is do we just want a competent offense, or do we want an elite offense?
We want him to be that no doubter.
Yeah, but
I said,
you have to know it's going to work, because Ben Johnson, you say, okay, look at what he's done in Detroit. But I would argue the combination of Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson is the reason the offense moves the way it does. The reason Amon-Ra St. Brown is an absolute lunatic, even when the game is over. Did you watch that film breakdown on his final 3 plays of a game where the game was already over and Amon-Ra St. Brown's throwing blocks like he's in the Super Bowl? Like that's, and I know winning does that. And I think, DJ Moore has shown that, we saw it in the preseason where he was like breaking like 5 tackles. He certainly is a guy that's hungry when his mind is right. But that's the point, is like Ben Johnson has the plays and is smart and is going to run an offense that's got so many different looks. That's like one of the most innovative offense, top 5 the last 3 years in football. But Dan Campbell is the reason that they're so dialed into the details, that they play with the kind of toughness they have, the way they execute, and the relentlessness of the approach they have. Like that part of it, I think, is a lot of Dan Campbell. So I just think it's a huge risk reward with Ben Johnson. So I understand the idea of swinging for the fences while you've got Caleb Williams. But if you want to call Mike Vrabel playing it safe, at the same time, I think there's less of a risk with him, because you know who he is, and then you know who Caleb Williams is, and now you've got a team that's going to hold each other accountable, play with toughness, and then you let Caleb Williams continue to develop with it. Because if it doesn't work with Ben Johnson, if he's not the guy that can corral these guys to be disciplined and execute properly, then it is going to completely unravel.
Yeah.
Where I feel like a guy like Mike Vrabel might that there's less of a propensity of it just completely bottoming out, if that makes sense.
No, for sure it does. And I think it depends for me on what his offensive coordinator plans would be. And if the Giants are foolish enough to fire Dable, then I wanted Dable instead of Flus back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's who I wanted. So I would be very happy with that. I'd be cool with that all the way around. Like you said, man, we're gonna be rooting for them no matter what. Whatever they do,
my plan is I told my producer and good friend Steven Nicholas, who is our producer for CSU Bears, I go, can you make me a graphic with meters, and it has like Ben Johnson, then it has Mike Vrabel, and it has Cliff Kingsbury, and it has a couple other guys on there, and I every day I think I'm just going to change my mind as we get there, because the more every time I watch Ben Johnson on TV, I'm like, okay, that's who I want.
Hey, did you know that Campbell, I don't know if you've heard this, supposedly Campbell meets with both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn once a week, specifically with the intent of prepping them for being a head coach. Have you heard that?
No, I didn't hear that.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So, and Aaron Glenn, we've not talked about him at all, but I would love him as a head coach. If we weren't in our situation currently with Caleb Williams and the offense, he would be at the top of my list. I loved him as a player. I think he's an elite head coach with what he's done with what they've lost on defense in Detroit. I love everything about Aaron Glenn. But Dan Campbell is making time set aside for both his coordinators to prep them for what's to come, because he knows they're going to be gone, which, again, is another indicator of how awesome of a head coach he is. Yes, I love Ben Johnson. He's the Chuck Norris of NFL head coaches. But I think Ben is ready. So, we'll see. We'll see, man. Yeah, I'm going to fan no matter what.
To bring it full circle, I mean, New Year's resolution, mine would be that Ryan Poles has to go. I just do not trust that he can get it right. He massively failed Caleb Williams. I know Flus was involved too, but bringing in Waldron, that was just such a total disaster. Maybe he'll have a chance to redeem himself. If he's still around and these guys are confident that he can be the general manager of a winning team, then I guess we'll roll with him. But Braggs, you talked about the graphic that you were going to have made. I was working here on the side on a little face swap. When you talked about George McCaskey and the Pope, I was trying to do a face swap, and it didn't turn out great, but I'm going to put it on the show anyways.
Let's see it. I love it.
There's no glasses, but
that is great. That is excellent. 100%. The white smoke at the top of Hallis Hall. I mean, it really is, man. Like, these guys got to just stop acting like that.
No,
is church.
Like they're coaching their 6-year-old daughters. It's. I coached middle school football. I didn't go above that, and I just started coaching my 9-year-old daughter's co-ed basketball team, and it is very different than coaching middle school boys. I yell, I get in their face, I do all that, and my question would be, you talked about questions, Braggsy, maybe not for Ben Johnson, but for McCaskey. If you could trade anybody right now for Dan Campbell and have him be the Bears head coach, would you take Dan Campbell as your head coach? Because it's known what Campbell brings to the table and how he operates. So if McCaskey would say no to Dan Campbell, then there's a huge problem, and he should know that he's outdated himself to be owner of the franchise.
Well, I mean, for whatever reason, that they never brought Harbaugh in, and they've had multiple opportunities over the last 8 years.
5 years, yeah.
And then Bill Belichick the last 2 years. I don't give a shit how old he is.
Right.
And so, like, I wasn't a bit when I was saying that they needed to, he would have been probably on the top of my list, because it's everything that I've learned from this organization this year. And the more I start to cover this team and, have more knowledge of what goes on there and understanding how the sausage is made, it makes it harder for me as a fan, because it's disturbing at times when I hear different things of how Hallis Hall runs. And that has made me, like I said, go back to the Dan Quinn thing where they flew him out on coach. David Kaplan reported that. Well, guess who Dan Quinn's agent? Dan Quinn's agent also is agent to Ben Johnson. And so when you hear Ben Johnson say, one of my criteria is that the organizations that I'm going to go to need to learn from the mistakes they made in the past, something tells me he's talking about when they flew Dan Quinn out. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so this is our reputation. This is their reputation that they have to wear. And we're a national embarrassment on TV, but there's things that go on at Hallis Hall that we don't know about as fans that are even worse, that the people underneath the owners have to deal with to appease the Pope there. And so, we had the head of Hard Knocks on during our, Hard Knocks postgame shows. And she said that one of the criteria was that she confirmed it on our show that they weren't allowed to swear. That came down from the McCaskies. That's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
There was a fight during training camp with Jervon Dexter. They did not show it. How many Hard Knocks have they done where they've not shown there was one fight in 5 weeks in camp. They did not show it on Hard Knocks. Why?
Unbelievable.
Who cares? That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
From a young player, young ending player.
Kyle Long and Akeem Hicks used to fight once a year at training camp, and it was like a rite of passage. When they fight, you know that it was like, that it's like when the groundhog sees his shadow and spring is here. That's how you knew football season was here, was when Akeem Hicks and Kyle Long had enough of each other. And so but now we don't want to have that. Like it's ridiculous. So to me, that's where I've started to lean more towards the conclusion of how important it is to have a coach that comes in here that has the cachet that supersedes the organization. They've hired, Mark Trestman and Matt Eberflus and Matt Nagy, that when they come in, thank you, Bears, for giving me a job. We need to have somebody in here where the Bears are going, thank you for coming here. Please save us. And so to not interview Bill Belichick, he said he had his Bible for each team, that if they were to interview him, he would show the Bible of how to fix your organization. How do you not interview him to at least see what his thoughts were on your team? Like, oh, well, Bill Belichick was talking bad about Caleb Williams, so that I don't need my coach to treat Caleb Williams like he's a king. The fact that the players voted him as a captain was an indictment on the locker room. He doesn't need to be a captain in his rookie year. You don't need to give him some, charity captain's patch. Let him earn it as a player in the locker room. Lance Briggs talked about how he didn't get a captain's patch until Urlacher was gone. And at that point, Mark Trestman was doing rotating captains. They're all looking at him like, what is wrong with you? And so there's no the leadership standpoint. And to me, that's why I've come to the conclusion that there's just so much poison from the top down of the mindset and the softness of this organization that they need a coach in here that's got enough cachet that he's not going to mold to what the Bears are trying to do. And we have to mold to how he wants to do things and how he wants to run things from a football organizational standpoint. And so is Ben Johnson got enough cachet that he's going to hold his ground and not allow, Mark Potash said it best. Everybody that comes to Hallis Hall, it becomes a worse version of themselves. Don't let Hallis Hall change you. And so that is, I think, a big message to whoever comes in here. We need this coach to change us. We can't let it change them. Yeah,
that's heavy, man.
Well said. Yeah.
If I had any more to drink, I would cheers on that one, but I
got a little left here. I honestly, and it's like, my first instinct is to say Ben Johnson because I want the best for Caleb Williams. But then the more I talk about it when I'm in Twitter spaces all night long, we really actually get into the weeds of talking about it. And you talk about the discipline or lack thereof, the loose lips with all the players just airing out everything about the team, the softness from the organization. I'm like, damn, like as much as it would be good to have a great play caller and an advanced mind, I also know just how important it is that this culture gets put back together, because it's completely crumbled this year. So ultimately, like you said, I mean, it's all out of our control. Let's hope they get it right. Whoever they do hire, I'll be hoping for the best. But I promise you, for the next 6 months until they get to the season, it's no hype. It's a no hype zone over here. No Green Bay sucks. No hype zone. Prove it.
Yeah.
Everyone just shut your mouths and prove it. And that's the other reason why yes, I'd love them to, Caleb Williams, if they're going to play their starters, if Caleb Williams, he deserves to finish on a good note, 4 touchdowns, beats the Packers, ends the losing streak before the season's over. I'm not going to fight that. But at the same time, maybe the better thing for this team is to wear an 11-game losing streak for the next 6 months and have that taste in your mouth that actually keeps you on your toes and doesn't make you think about the positives. There's 0 positives that they should just be bloodthirsty to right the wrong of this season. So there is a part of me that's like, you know what, wear this losing streak all the way until next September. But again, I'm not going to fight it if Caleb Williams goes out there and has a fantastic performance against Green Bay, but I'm not betting on it either.
So, all right. So before we go off the air, then what is your prediction, Braggs? And then I'll go to Bryan. I'll go last. What's your prediction for Sunday?
Pain. I mean, Green Bay is just going to rub it in our faces. Yeah. And, it's a well-coached team and a well-disciplined team versus a poorly coached team. And so I just, after 6-3 against the Seahawks, you can't win a game up, that where your defense holds them to 6 points. I don't know, man. But I also think this is the most unpredictable, even through the 10-game losing streak. You never know how they're going to play week to week.
They had them at Soldier Field.
Right.
So there was a stat that came out today. I forget who it was, Butkus Stats, whoever it was on Twitter. But basically, when our tackles are intact, the difference between Caleb Williams' success in passing and offense and touchdowns and whatnot is astronomical versus when Braxton Jones and or Darnell Wright are not in. All indications are Braxton Jones is back this week. So it's Green Bay week. So I'm saying 27-26, we win on a missed last-second field goal by
I told you this guy.
Green Bay Packers.
I love it.
We win to give us some momentum with some glaring holes. And this is another thing I will say about polls is it doesn't matter if polls is it. Any GM, any one of us on this conference call right now would tell McCaskey and crew, we need to fix the lines. So it doesn't take a genius to know our weaknesses are up front. So we win in Green Bay. Our weaknesses are up front. We attack the offseason and fuck the world in 2025 for Chicago.
Love it. I love it. Love the
I would love that. Yeah, I would love that, Bryan. I would love that. I can't go that far. I would love to see it. I'm totally fine with our draft pick changing if it means beating Green Bay finally after 6 years. But man, I cannot possibly pick that. No matter how rosy I'm looking at this game. I got to tell you, in 2009, I went to Manitowoc, Wisconsin, about an hour south of Green Bay. I was in a wedding. I got taunted the entire time. We had this groomsman wedding, the night before the rehearsal dinner, and all the groomsmen are there and they're just giving me shit the entire time. Like, oh, the Bears suck. Jay Cutler, it's not going to matter. We're still going to own the Bears and all this. And they were right. And that was 15 years ago and nothing has changed. And so until they show me they can beat Green Bay consistently, not just out of nowhere once in a while, like 2018, I just can't do it. I cannot pick them anymore. I hope they beat them, Bryan. So next week here on Bears Over Beers, we can toast something real special. I'll get something out of the beer cellar that'll be real nice. But I can't pick it, man. I hope, but I can't.
Well, and Green Bay really needs a get right game. They haven't been playing their best football here.
New Orleans was a get right game. Fuck that, Braggsy.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
it just feels like they're all over the place.
Need shit. They need to be hardened up for the playoffs, and that's what Chicago will do because Chicago might be an inferior opponent, but they will fight Green Bay, and Green Bay probably going to win. I mean, I'll say it; they're probably going to win, but they'll be in a fist fight, and that'll get them ready for the playoffs. And Romeo Dobbs and all the guys, Tyler Kraft, Tucker Kraft, they'll be ready for the playoffs after fighting us. It's just a matter of if we show up. If Edwards, and crew show up, who knows what's going on with Brisker still. I know he's on IR, but our deep, we still got players. Javon, if he can step up. Montez has been MIA all season. Jalen, that's one thing I love about Jalen is he's been in every single game fighting his tail off because he cares. And, and I know he cares about Green Bay. So if we can pick off Jordan, I don't know, man, anything can happen, but I'm with you. Even if we win, nothing has changed. It's just F Green Bay is all it is. It's not, we're not better than Green Bay. We snuck one by them when it mattered, which is what this rivalry is about. We were a worse team against a better Green Bay, I'd argue, that Thanksgiving game against Aaron Rodgers and Tracy Porter and Cutler ruined that one. We were a worse team then, and we won that game. Yep. So, anything's possible. But, I wouldn't be surprised either way. Braggs, we'll have to have you back on, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Who do you guys got winning the Notre Dame game here tomorrow?
Notre Dame. Without Carson Beck, I think their offense is
everybody. Cole's taking Notre Dame. His brother was in the studio. His brother's like me with Notre Dame. Like I'm very negative about them all the time. And but he's actually picking them to win too. So that was interesting. But I'm like, I'm not getting my hopes up. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I'm excited for the game tomorrow.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm in North Carolina. I am surrounded by Bulldog fans. Surrounded.
Yeah.
And some diehards, like they know the backup players. I've known about Brock Bowers for years over here. And they've got talent. Georgia has such talent, but Notre Dame's got talent too. Xavier Watts is probably the best player on the field when Georgia offense versus Notre Dame defense. So I think with Carson Beck being out, I think, you got a new quarterback. I actually like Notre Dame. I can't say I like them for the national, but I think they can win this game.
Well, Oregon got their butts whooped, so that was interesting. And man, Texas barely snuck out. So this college football playoff has been fun.
It has
but I'm excited for tomorrow. We'll see. And then I got to say, Ryan, I really like your backdrop with the wrestling figurines because it's taking me down memory lane. 100%. A lot of ones I used to own back in the day. I actually I have a box of them at my mom's house.
Let me see if I can pan over to this. Hold on a second here.
Big Boss Man for sure. I've got that one, no doubt.
There you go.
That is a good collection, man.
You got a couple of Hulks in there.
I host a wrestling podcast too called Top Rope Nation. And man, I love the Hasbros, WW Hasbros. So much nostalgia for those. Absolutely.
Well, maybe one day through my Bears coverage and stuff, I've become friends with D'Lo Brown. Maybe one day I'll have him cross paths with you. He's a really good dude.
Amazing.
Yeah, dude, he's a great dude and a diehard Bears fan. He texts me all the time, just randomly. He lives in Vegas, so it'll be like 2 a.m. and I'll be like getting a text from D'Lo. And it, like when it first started happening, when it first started happening, I was just like, yeah, exactly. Like it now I've known him for years, so it's not as weird. But like at first, I'm like, D'Lo Brown is texting me. This is the coolest thing ever. Like,
we bring him up once in a while on the pod. It's how many people our age, how many times did you walk through the mall trying to do the D'Lo Brown walk?
Oh yeah,
I mean, come on.
No,
is he the swagger one with the hanging arm?
Oh yeah, bobblehead. He was
chest protector.
Yep, 100%. And he's got a great story of how he became a diehard Bears fan. But
I thought he played football.
No, he didn't. But diehard from Philly, born and raised in Philly, but loved the Chicago Bears so much that when he was announced coming out as D'Lo Brown, it would say from Chicago.
Oh, nice,
D'Lo Brown, awesome. Because of his affinity for the Chicago Bears. So maybe I'll send him your way one day. But he does a lot of stuff for Impact Wrestling. And when he's in the city, maybe you can go by there and watch one of their events and you can meet him that way too. He's a great dude and
absolutely
diehard Bears fan. So
that's fun.
But yeah, appreciate you guys having me on, man. I know we've been talking about this for some time. So with the ND game getting canceled or postponed till tomorrow, opened up some things. So I'm glad I was able to hop on with you guys and talk some Bears. Excited for the off season.
Yeah, I'm curious,
Aren't we
Bragsy,
all?
what would be your top choice for first round this coming year?
It's I don't care. Abdul Carter, I'm fine with. I loved the video of the left tackle from LSU that everybody's putting around Will Campbell talking like sounds like a offensive line coach already. That's cool. And then obviously the defensive tackle Mason Graham from Michigan. I wouldn't be against any of those three. So let's see where they fall. They can get anywhere as low as 5. They're sitting at 9. I think there's probably a more realistic chance they can fall to 7 at the very most, I guess, or least, however you want to frame it. But we got to get through free agency first, see how they approach that. And then, I think at this point, they're still not out of the, I think you should always take best player available when you're picking in the top 10, no matter what your need is. Right. The Bears have a lot of needs. I think at this point, whoever's at the top of your board, that's the guy you have to take as far as best player available. I know that's a cop-out answer, but it is the truth for where they're at. Even if it's a position that, you need more here, but, you can't pass on top blue chip talent. Like you said, we don't have enough blue chip players on this team. So if one of them is blue chip, you got to take them when you got that chance. So excited for it. That's for sure, guys.
Yeah. Fun stuff.
Braggs, can't thank you enough for joining us, man. This has been awesome. Man. We went a little longer than usual, but
if you have me on a show, you're going to go long. This is why This is why Adam Hogue walks off the set most days, because I do not shut up. So if you're bringing me on, I'm gonna fill up the time. So I apologize. You don't have to apologize to me. I have to apologize to you guys and anyone that ever brings me on their shows, because this is what it turns into.
No, hey, Flo and Santos, awesome, go check them out. Go check them out. Get a Polish porter and bear down, y'all.
Well, maybe one of the days we'll meet up there together and have a drink. So
that'd be awesome.
That'd be great. Check Braggs out on CHGO. He's on there all the time. Always, I go to it right away after the game. Usually, they're in Second City Gridiron, of course, to check out the reactions, which of course has been a lot of anger recently. But Braggs, you're the man. Really, really appreciate it. You guys, while you're here, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Second City Gridiron channel on YouTube or here on the podcast feed. If you're listening on the podcast feed, we would appreciate that very much. All kinds of content going up. We're going to be putting out stuff throughout the off season as well. So, we got Bill Zimmerman here. We got Taylor Dahl, of course, JB and Lester with Bear and Balanced, Mason West, Bears Over Beers. We're going to be continuing into the off season this year. So keep it tuned right here to Second City Gridiron. We'll be back next Wednesday night, and we will either be celebrating a big win by the Bears at Lambeau Field or once again drinking heavily and talking about an L. We'll see, but we'll see you all again next week. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the game. Go Bears.